Hi everybody, my name is Luke and I am the Deputy President for Dublin Students' Union in the Blanchardstown campus. This series is to encourage students to run for their elections and bridge that kind of political gap between students and the wider politic spectrum. Throughout this series, we'll be joined by multiple progressive community leaders and exploring topics such as minority groups and leadership, why bother running at all, and then learning a little bit about our guests in kind of each session. Today, I am joined by a very familiar face, your current Vice President for Welfare and Equality on the Tala campus, Lesley Barrett. And Lesley, for the benefit of our students watching today, would you be able to tell us just a little bit about yourself? So kind of along the lines of who you are and what you do.
Okay, so as Luke said, I'm Lesley Barrett. I am the VP for Welfare and Equality on the Tala campus. Before that, I was studying social care applied social care in the Tala campus, which I graduated from last November. I am was a mature student. I'm now a mature officer, or immature officer sometimes. And I am a mother to a 7-year-old. So that's me, I suppose, in a nutshell.
That's brilliant. And I suppose kind of following on from that, why do you do what you do? And I think that's kind of an extremely important topic to touch on. Because it kind of goes kind of like, why are you doing what you do? But also then if you want to share an accomplishment or two with us that you'd love to share with the students.
Okay, so I suppose for me personally, the role now kind of aligns to what I study, but that's not to say that you have to be like studying the social sciences to be a good welfare officer, because some of the best welfare and equality officers I know come from completely different backgrounds. But for me, I suppose the reason I was studying what I was studying is because I've always kind of, I suppose, championed the underdog. I don't know if that's it's a great expression, but I kind of believe in equity and equality of like access and opportunities, because I think we're all aware that there's some cohorts and minorities of people who don't get that same start as everybody else, or face barriers that maybe some people don't. So that was really important for me in like championing that, and I was like really wanted to kind of get more diverse kind of mix of students involved. And unfortunately, I literally had planned this year to be like running up to people and be like, right, come on, get involved. But we haven't been able to do that. So we've tried to do it in other ways. And one of the biggest kind of things that meant a lot to me this year, before I was elected last year, we worked on a motion that we brought to USI Congress around supporting recovery and celebrating recovery and supporting substance misuse and recovery from that. And I think, you know, it was the fact that got passed was a big accomplishment in itself, but then it meant that for the first time we had like a celebration of recovery in International Recovery Month in September and an International Recovery Day, and that was the first time that kind of piece of work has ever been done. And that's a cohort of students who would face additional barriers to education every single day. You know, recovery is a lifelong process, and going through third level education while you're in recovery can be extremely difficult and challenging. So I think that deserved to be recognised and celebrated. So that was one kind of achievement that I'm really proud of from this year.
That's really, really cool. And I suppose then I think it's really important then focusing in on kind of the importance of running for leadership roles then, because you know there's so many barriers or perceived barriers, should I say, for people, as you know there's this kind of perception that, you know, even politics, be it local or otherwise, it's a game that matters. To get elected you need to be the coolest person in the room, or you know, the most brown envelopes to hand out, or that it's designed for the wider population and not a minority within our own larger society. Have you ever encountered any of those barriers, and why do you think it's important to run for these leadership roles to tackle those barriers that we perceive to exist?
Yeah, I suppose for me, like being a sole parent in one parent family and being a mature student, that was a kind of a barrier to me, or I thought it would be. Because I was thinking, well, how are you going to manage time, and how are you know, like your family, like you have other commitments, will I be able to be connected to the student body and the student voice? For discounting kind of my own experiences, the fact that I was a student and I had been a student, you know, kind of, I think being a barrier to myself, and you know, that kind of self-doubt and imposter syndrome that everyone kind of talks about. And it's actually interesting because we've had these discussions in other groups, and it's something that everyone experiences. But it can be extremely difficult, and especially if you don't come from a background, like people think, oh, you have to be very political, or you have to be involved in kind of, you don't. You know, what I think is important is having that passion and that drive. I think for most people, why they get involved in something initially, for the majority, or maybe I'm naive, even on a larger national political level, I think for most people when they get involved, it is genuinely that there's a passion or something that they're interested in that drives them. And I think that's what's most important. Like, if you have the want to make a change or a difference or an impact, then those other barriers can all be worked around. There is ways to mitigate them. You don't have to be the most outspoken person in the room. You don't have to be the most popular person. You don't have to have the most brown envelopes. You just have to be, I suppose, driven and passionate about whatever is important to you. And if it's important to students, like if you're going through something from whatever walk of life you're coming from, there's other people who are coming from that walk of life who've experienced and who maybe need someone to be their champion, you know. And I think if you have that passion, that drive and that willingness and want to try, that's more important than any barrier you face, because you can mitigate those barriers, and it's not to discount those challenges that you might face, but there is ways to mitigate them, certainly. Yeah.
That's really inspiring. And can I ask, Lesley, has there ever kind of been, or has there been work done either by obviously yourself or any of our colleagues in TU Dublin that have done that's been done to kind of ensure that we really tackle these issues on the ground when it comes to breaking down those kind of perceived barriers, be that through your work as a student leader or even otherwise, to highlight to students why this actually means something?
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're on the outside looking in, I think, especially with the work with the student union, there's a perception that, you know, we throw all the fun parties and it's all about like the nightlife and, you know, the fun stuff. And I think even when you're running, there is somewhat of that perception to you as well, depending on your experience and how involved you've been. Like, so for me, like, I had a kind of an understanding from student council of work that goes on. But if you didn't have that understanding, you might know, like we've been involved in some, like, as a union, and not just myself, like, in like the gender expression policy, would say that's a good example of something that's been recent and that's so important, which wasn't in existence in TU Dublin, and it now is. You know, and that gender expression policy will help students who are transitioning or approaching a phase in their life where they're thinking about transitioning, or like, and it's put a policy in place that there's a way for this to be handled, and it's a way to be handled with dignity and respect, and, you know, at the pace of the person, whereas that previously wouldn't have been there before. And I also currently, myself and Hamza, one of our colleagues, are on the race equity working group that's putting together policies and areas to embed inclusion within the core of TU Dublin going forward, like, and to make opportunities, like I was saying, to kind of mitigate some of those barriers people face. And that's an ongoing process, and hopefully that will result like that in a policy. You know, we're still in that work in progress, but these are all things that are so important, like the work that we're doing, that maybe people aren't aware of, you know, and it will impact students for years to come, hopefully. And yes, you know, things change over time, but what's been put in place now and that kind of work will, if it makes even life for one student better, or they have that opportunity, then it's done its job, you know. And I think there's some of the things that are really important, and there's lots of those type of things that go on a daily basis, and even things from like getting library spaces opened, study spaces, you know, fighting for like mitigation, not mitigation, you know, the like circumstances during COVID, like for exams, like they're all things that we would like represent the student voice on, and they affect students, and they mightn't even know that we're doing it, but it's so important to do, because like at the end of the day, we just kind of want to make students have the best experience possible in college, and some of that is done in the classroom and some of that is done outside of the classroom. A lot of it's done online at the moment, so it's kind of making sure that people have that kind of ease of access and opportunity, and I think we really try to drive that, and it's brought to us by the students, it's voted on by student council, and they dictate the work we do. So it's like the definition of, I suppose, government is of the people, for the people, by the people, and I think that's kind of at our core, because our student council and our students inform the work we do.
No, 100%, and you hit the nail on the head there. I think when it comes to kind of democracy and kind of that kind of transparency that's led by the students, I think TUDSU really does do that well. And I know we might be biased in saying that, but you know, we really do. We're one of the front leaders in that, and I think it's so important that students know that as well, especially that like when they do get elected, that they have an entire, they have almost 30,000 people that's leading that, and that is a movement within itself. But,
yeah.
You know, on top of that, then I suppose, you know, obviously, thank you so much for that. But I suppose then we see so many other issues then facing students, such as the climate crisis. And I've said this every session, but I think it's important to call it a crisis, because what we're doing, we're standing on the precipice of a catastrophe about to happen. And, you know, even when we see the youth vote in the last kind of general election as well, there's a starvation for a greener tomorrow. And then obviously being a leader yourself, how do you think that our generation of kind of future leaders can make that difference in tackling climate, even as student leaders going for their own SU elections? Because we were on another session there, and one of the people said, even getting it onto the ballot, even running on that platform, getting it onto the ballot leads to a conversation within itself, and that's already a small victory. Well, what advice would you give on that?
I think it's so important that I think we need to make a shift towards embedding the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, into like every aspect of life that we can. I think they should be embedded into every course. You know, they should be embedded into our work. We do try, and even making a small change. I think this year has shown us a lot that a lot more things can be done online. There doesn't need to be, say, for example, for endless forms when it can be done online, and that's one of the things that has come out of this. But I think it's just about embedding that work and making a conscious effort to embed them SDG. Like, you might not be able to embed all of them into every aspect, but look, focusing on ones, right? Well, what can we do, and how can we do it, and how can we raise awareness, and keeping that conversation, as you say, going, getting it going amongst the students, letting them know what we're doing, and always striving to be better, because you know there's always more that we can be doing.
100%. And then, just as we're obviously coming to the end of our kind of tea time chats, I suppose, could I ask you to touch on why bother to run at all? Like, why be that change maker? You know, why be that leader within the students' union? As you know, you mentioned earlier about the imposter syndrome. You know, those doubts are really beginning to set in on people. Or they could say, oh, I couldn't do that, or oh, I'm up against the surefire candidate who's going to definitely win here, or even kind of stuff like that. What would you say to that?
Why bother? Well, first of all, why not? You know, that's like, never discount yourself from the race because you might think you're uncertain of winning, or there's a dead cert. The thing about it is, first of all, if you run and you win, that's great. If you run and you lose, you learn something, but you've done something, and you know you can say, well, I tried. But I think if you're passionate about like making change in whatever area, like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be passionate about everything. Like, you know, we all come into the role and we have a manifesto that we write, and you know, we have things that we want to achieve, but we learn so much in our roles as well, and we do develop other interests in other areas, and we get other passions, and you get to work on other things. And I think if you have that interest, if there's a part of you that's sitting there looking, kind of going, this isn't right, or I would like to see this change, that's the reason that you need to run. That's the reason you put yourself out there. And it is like, I don't discount how, like, you know, it can be very vulnerable putting yourself out there, and because you're asking people, it feels like you're asking them to like you, but that's not what you're asking them to do. Like, take that out of the equation. You're actually asking them to believe in what you can do, your abilities, your capabilities, your passion and your drive. And I think if you have that and you're transparent in that, and you say, look, you don't make empty promises, and like say, like, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I want to drive, this needs to change, I'm going to do my best to change it. I think that goes an awful long way, and that's the reason why you need to run. Get involved. It's so easy, and we all do it. Like, you know, the sofa commentary, you know, when people, when they're watching the match, oh, they should have put this person out, or they shouldn't have done that, they should have. It's so easy to do that. It's a lot harder to be the person in the room that's speaking up about making that change and doing it, but it's a lot more rewarding as well. So I would say that's one of the reasons that you should definitely consider, go for it. You know, there's nothing really to lose. As I say, if worse comes to worse and you don't win, you learn something along the way, and you meet new people, and you find other ways of getting involved, and you run the next time, and maybe you win the next time. But you've given it a go, and you can, like, look at yourself. It's all about as well yourself, about being able to kind of look at yourself and kind of go, do you know what, I tried my best, and that's all I can do.
That's absolutely brilliant. And you know, that it reminds me of a chat that I was having with colleagues earlier, and even on these type of sessions, kind of two areas. It was saying, if you're not going to put your name on the ballot, if not you, then who?
Yeah.
And it's so important, because even putting your name on that ballot, you're already breaking them barriers straight away. You're changing that conversation.
Yeah.
And you know, then the second piece then was, there's no such thing as losing an election, which is contrary to some people's beliefs. But what I remember having a chat with a colleague, and it was very much along the lines of, you either are successful at an election or you learn from your election. And that's so true, because, you know, I lost my first election when I first went for the Students' Union for a part-time position. I lost it. And you go, you look at what you did, you learn where you fell down, and then you come back swinging at it the next year, and it makes you it almost makes you a better candidate, because you know what it's like to lose, and you know, you're able to reflect on it. But 100%, if not you, who? And then I suppose, thank you so much, obviously, again, Lesley, but I'm going to throw a quick curveball here to you as somebody who has won a TU Dublin Students' Union election. Have you any campaign tips, tricks, or advice for anyone who's running their campaigns coming up?
Okay, I hate campaigns. I think I always think, I was like, that was the one thing that I thought was a barrier. Another, we were talking more about barriers. I was like, I don't know how to run a campaign. Like, how do you run a campaign? Like, and what I learned was, you don't think of it, like, don't think of the bigger picture. It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Like, so it's like, I suppose the first thing is think about what you want to achieve. Like, why are you running? Like, and then it's just putting that, like, it's basically putting pen to paper, putting it out there. And it's very different, I suppose, running it online than in person. So you don't have any, and that, I think this is not necessarily a bad thing, but we don't have any of the fancy things like having a stand with, like, giving out lollipops, or you haven't got any of those things that sometimes, and that's all good, like, and that's not to slate them type of campaigns, but it's really a good way. You're selling yourself and selling your ideals, your passion. And I think that's one thing I would say if you're running for an election. One major tip is be honest with yourself, what you can achieve. Don't make empty promises, you know. Don't say, oh, I'm going to change the world, and like, because it's not possible. It's not saying that you don't have to have ambition, but I'm going to try to work, like, we'll use the student contribution charge as an example. I'm going to abolish that, and there's no way I'm going to do that on my own, right? But what I can do is I can continue that work. I can work with my students' union, I can work nationally with USI to drive that conversation and to fight for it. But I'm not going to make that promise to my students that are voting for me, because then I can't stand up in a year's time and say, well, I didn't do that. You know, that's an empty promise. Don't make empty promises. Be honest, be realistic, and just be yourself, because that's what people will like. You know, if you're honest about your passions and your drive and why you're running and what you want to achieve, people will get behind you. You know, they won't get behind. They can, you know, people, we all can see through people when they're like fake. We don't want empty promises. We've had that. That's what we get them all the time from politicians when it comes election time. You know, they come knocking the door. We're going to do this, and this, and how many of them get fulfilled? And then, you know, you're just angry then at them. You know, so don't do that. Be honest. Be realistic. Be yourself. And focus on what you want to achieve and how you might achieve it. But yeah, the honesty is the big thing, and just be yourself and enjoy it. That's the other thing. So often, like, you don't take the time to actually enjoy it, and you know, win or learn, you should enjoy the process.
100%. 100%. And then kind of finally we can begin to wrap up our tea time chats on what advice would you give to the people who are currently on the ballot right now and they're just kind of waiting for those nominations to close, and I think that's kind of like the moment of it all. It's where everyone begins to start panicking because it's the calm before the storm.
Yeah, I suppose use this time to focus on like that, refining your manifesto. You may have put something together and put it put in your manifesto, but refining that, building on that, how you like plan what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So it's all online, so okay, so you don't need to plan like your stands and who's going to man it and stuff, but you do need to plan like, okay, so how am I going to do my post? Well, who do I want to reach? Am I going through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, or like how am I going to do that? What type of things do I need? Do I need to make some posters or some videos or some TikToks, or how am I going to get creative about this? I say TikTok as someone who has never even downloaded the app, but I mean they're all things that's what you can be doing now. You can't publish anything, you can't start campaigning yet, but you can have all that stuff ready to go in the background so that you can hit the ground running when you are allowed to start campaigning. So get planning, get some stuff prepared. And then as well, speak if you need to like link in with some of the officers who are in place and finding a bit more about the role. Like it's a good time to learn, finding out what you can and can't do in regards to in your remit of your role, so that you're not making those empty promises and you're not. And then as well, if you make a mistake or you say something, owning it. You know, don't be like, be prepared for that to just kind of be like, look, you know, I shouldn't have said X, Y, Z. I made a mistake. I'm human. I hold my hand. Don't try and hide it or anything. You know, like. But I think if you get good planning in now, and get everything, get your stuff prepared, it takes a bit of the pressure off during the election time. You can have stuff ready to go. And you mean, here's a tip. When the days when you have your hair and your best lighting and everything the way you want it. Change your top, change your background, and do a few videos in the one day. You know, if you have a day that you've had lessons, say you've got classes, and one day you don't. That's the type of thing you can be doing in the meantime. You don't have to do everything every single day. You can get prepared and get organised now.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Lesley. And that actually brings us to the end of our tea time chats. And Lesley, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the students have taken something away from this. I know I certainly have. But I would like to thank you for your time today. Do you have any social medias or TUDSU social medias to plug or anything like that before we run away?
All of our social medias are at TUDSU. I'm at Lesley B13 on Instagram, I think. If people want to give me a follow, I'm not that interested, but feel free to give me a follow. But all of our information, like on our events and everything, goes up on our social media, and you'll find everything you need to know on at TUDSU.
Brilliant, and all of those will be somewhere up here or down there or wherever the edit goes. But on that, I would just like to say thank you so much, Lesley, for joining us. And that brings us to a close. So I'm just going to say goodbye, everybody, and thanks for joining in.
Bye. Thanks, Lou.